I know, it's been a while, but I'm back because this morning we got the announcement, or at least I saw it this morning, UFC 305 main event announcement. Israel Adesanya is back and he's fighting for the title against Dricus du Plessis. I hope I've pronounced that right. And I just sort of wanted to explore this fight closer to it, hopefully, if I get my act together. I will have a better, more like a prediction video or a preview. This is more of a video sort of exploring the state of the middleweight division right now, Adesanya's legacy himself, because there is a lot of sort of talk about him right now, and I just wanted to give my thoughts on everything, as well as sort of kind of what could happen in this fight. Obviously I'll go into more detail in another video. So yeah, this has been a long time coming. I am very excited for the return of Israel Adesanya. When he is at his best, he's one of the best fighters in the division, and also he's one of my favourite, and he can be very entertaining and very destructive, but he can also be quite passive, slow, boring. He can win a lot of decisions quite comfortably, but it's not always what the fans want to watch. So starting off, I just want to talk about the middleweight division as a whole. Obviously, recently we just had Sean Strickland versus Costa. Sean obviously won that. It wasn't the most inspired performance. It was a good, comfortable performance. The end was a little bit crazy in terms of, you know, the flying front kicks and that sort of stuff. Obviously, Sean said he didn't expect Costa to be on the back foot as much, but if you're a fan of Sean Strickland and you want to see him get the title back, it's not really the most confidence-building performance, for me at least. But there's a lot of people saying it should be him and Dricus rather than Izzy. And I kind of see it, especially because of how close their first fight was. Sean has just won a fight before this. He's already beaten Izzy pretty comfortably. So I can understand that, but also at the same time I can see from the UFC they want to get Izzy back in there, and you know, with the ages he's at, they don't really want to waste him on like a build-up fight, maybe against a rematch against Strickland for a title eliminator, or put him in there against Whittaker this weekend, because obviously Khamzat has now backed out of that. I'll get onto that in a minute. When you look at, let's say for example, Conor McGregor, as much as when he came back to fight against Poirier, putting him in there against Khabib instead would have been a horrible idea for Conor's career. For the UFC, it probably, looking back at it, is a missed opportunity, because there were sort of rumblings that maybe Khabib would have had that one final fight against Conor, and that would have been his retirement. I don't know about that. I think he probably would have just stayed retired no matter what. But if you look at that, Conor's probably never going to get back to title contender level. I feel like the UFC are putting Izzy in this because they want to just, he is a star and they want to get as much out of him as possible, and putting him in there for a title fight. If he then wins that, then you've got the rematch with Sean, maybe a third fight with Whittaker, maybe a fight with Khamzat if, you know, he's still in the picture. So yeah, I understand why they've done it, and I'm here for it because I do want to see Izzy get the belt back and maybe even move up to fight Pereira again. But the one big question for this fight, before we even look at who could potentially win it, is this title shot deserved? And that's the biggest question for me. Izzy has come off a 11-month layoff, and when you've got other fighters like a Sean Strickland who have been fighting, you know, other up-and-coming middleweights that are competing and winning, is Izzy coming off the back of this layoff really deserving of this shot? Obviously he lost the title pretty convincingly against Sean Strickland. Obviously that first round was really bad for him, and he never really got a foothold in the fight after that. And also Sean, before he fought Costa, did fight Dricus, and it was a very close fight. A lot of people thought Sean won it. Sean obviously feels like he won it. And in terms of that, he said, you know, I've been a company man, I've took on this other fight, it's my turn for the title shot, obviously after he won against Costa. So you could argue that. However, for me, some points on why Izzy does deserve this. If I'm looking over here, it's because I've got no up on the screen, by the way. For why Izzy does deserve this is he has been a great servant of the UFC, barring this last year or so. He's been fighting constantly in the UFC, elite level guys. He took on all challenges. He's headlined cards. He is a former champion and a pretty dominant champion he's never really been in a fight where, other than the Sean fight, and maybe the second Pereira fight when he did end up winning by knockout, you never felt at any point in the fight it was slipping away from him or he was losing. It may not have been entertaining and interesting, such as the Whittaker fight, the Cannonier fight, the Romero fight, but in terms of at middleweight, he's always been pretty comfortable in the octagon with anyone. And this fight was set up after Duplessis beat Whittaker, but he got injured, so he had to pull out, and that's why Sean had to come in. So yeah, there's some reasons why this fight does make sense and is deserved. Let me know in the comments whether you think the UFC should have made this fight. But just one final thing before the end of the video. I just want to talk about Adesanya's legacy. No matter what happens in this fight, he could lose it and retire. He could win it, beat Sean, go up, become a double champ, and go down as the greatest UFC fighter of all time. You never know. But I just want to talk about his legacy at this present moment and what it is. To me, he's top 2 middleweights of all time, and he is in that conversation of greatest of all time. I don't think he's better than John Jones or GSP, Silva, or even Usman, particularly in my opinion. But I think he is in that conversation of we have to give him an honourable mention at least, and he's definitely a future Hall of Famer in my opinion. When you look at him, if you pull up his stats on the UFC website, he fought 4 times in 2018, 3 times in 2019, only twice in 2020, but that was COVID year and he couldn't have fought in the middle of the year. Then you've got 2021, he fought twice, and 2022 he fought 3 times, and twice again in 2023. Now, obviously, there's been 11 months since his last fight, September 2023, and this one is now August, halfway through August, so pretty much a year on from his last fight. So obviously he is coming off quite a big layoff, but he's always been there, you know, for the UFC and for this division and for himself, obviously. He's fought pretty much everyone at his weight class who has done anything substantial. The only ones he hasn't fought, Dricus, who he's fighting now, and Hamzat, who hasn't really fought an elite level middleweight yet. Obviously he was going to fight Whittaker. He didn't fight Costa, he fought Burns, he's fought Usman moving up to middleweight, and to be honest, that Usman fight was a lot closer than it should have been. He's the only person in the UFC to have knocked out Alex Pereira, who at that point, and still currently, looks pretty much unbeatable. He is one of the most dominant and hardest to beat fighters in the UFC right now, and Izzy's beaten him, and I'm pretty sure he's the only one in the UFC to have beaten him. I think he's lost in MMA, I don't think it was UFC, and he's the only one as far as I'm aware to have knocked him out. So he has got a great legacy, and obviously he's had some boring fights. I'm not going to rewrite history. He has had some boring fights, but if you look at some of his most entertaining fights, you've got obviously the Silva fight. I thought that was pretty entertaining in terms of elite skill, not in terms of damage or stuff like that. Elite skill of martial artists, and it was kind of a passing of the torch moment from one elite kickboxer to the next. The first Whittaker fight was incredible, one of the best ways to have beaten a champion and one of the most dominant ways to have beaten a champion. The Kelvin Gastelum fight for the interim championship was another brilliant, entertaining fight, a war. You obviously seen his eyes, his lips after that fight. And the Paulo Costa fight as well was a very entertaining fight. It had, for me, pretty much everything in terms of high skill, and it obviously had a knockout in it, which was always amazing to watch. And the 2 fights he had with Pereira were some of the most entertaining fights. For me, Adesanya is so good that against the likes of a Marvin Vettori, a Yoel Romero, or a Jared Cannonier, who aren't sticking it on him because they are intimidated by his skills and his ability to counterpunch and knock people out, they're not on him as much as Whittaker was in the first fight, and Paulo Costa was in their fight, and Pereira was, obviously having the confidence of beating him in kickboxing before. For me, in order to beat Adesanya, you have to go for it, like Sean did. The problem with that is, when you go for it against him, that's where he finds holes in your game, because he is that good. And he's pretty good at keeping fights standing or denying your submission attempts from from a wrestling point of view, obviously he's very big and long for that weight class, so it is hard to get close to him, and he's got them, you know, trademarked hooks that he obviously got Whittaker out there with, that he dropped Paulo Costa with. That's why a lot of his fights have ended up being quite boring, because people don't put it on him as much because they're too scared of the danger coming back at them. And obviously the ones that weren't were Pereira and Strickland, who have beaten him. However, in terms of going towards this fight, he has had a long layoff, and if you, like I do, follow him on his Instagram and his socials, it does look like he's had a lot of partying, a lot of drinking, which Conor McGregor did in his long layoffs, obviously between the third Poirier fight and the now cancelled fight, and also the lack of consistency could hinder his performance, like John Jones versus Dominic Reyes. But that is my thoughts on the announcement. Like I said, I will definitely have a review of this fight, if not, hopefully a preview and a prediction for this fight closer to the time. I'd love to see if anyone else gets announced on the card that we'll be willing to look at. So yeah, thanks for watching. Make sure you do hit the like button and subscribe, and follow my Instagram to keep up to date with all stuff that's going on this channel. Hopefully this series will come back and be more consistent, and I'm hoping to bring some more stuff to the channel soon, especially because I'll be breaking up over the summer soon. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Take care.